Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world.
Welcome back to Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton, and I'm your host and guide on this podcast for about the next 20 minutes. So in this podcast, we are examining everything teamwork and how to create effective teams and build businesses that are meant to last. And on last week's podcast, we were discussing examples of teamworks from nature. And if you listened to it, I hope you enjoyed it and you learned about teamwork lessons from lions, elephants, and the water buffalo. If you didn't get an opportunity to listen to it, I'd highly encourage you to go back and tune in, because there's just so much that we can learn from nature about how to run our businesses more effectively. Today, I just wanted to expand this topic a little bit and take it just away from just purely teamwork to what's nature got to do with business in the first place. I am really passionate about the fact that the current ways that we run and lead business are no longer fit for purpose, and we need a new model. And where do we find this new model? I believe that when we look to nature, we can find a new model of a way to run and lead our businesses that is sustainable and appropriate for the 21st century. And I really want to start with a quote today, because I think this sums it up. It's an Albert Einstein quote, which said, "Look to nature and you will understand everything better." So look to nature and you will understand everything better. And I know from my own experience, the more time I spend in nature, the more clarity I get about my business, the more I get grounded to the environment around me, the more I have certainty and I guess more joy actually about what's going on in the world. Because let's just face it, nature has existed for millions and millions of years. It's always been here. We as the human species in our current form, not so long. So I really do think that there's a lot that we can learn from the natural world. I'm going to actually pull some of the material that we're going to talk about today from my book, Unbridled Business, Unlocking Nature's Wisdom to Reinvent Leadership. I'm happy to provide you, as a listener of this show, a copy of the book, an e-version of the book, and you will find that in the show notes and also on my website at businesshorsepower.com, where you'll also be able to listen to this podcast and read all the show notes about it. And the reason I wrote the book was because of this really important topic, that there is so much that we can learn to run our businesses better from nature, but not much is being written about this. And so this is a real area of my sweet spot of expertise, where I really love to share with people about what we can learn from the natural world that can help our businesses. So another quote to just get us going today would be this from Stephen Covey. "Dependent people need others to get what they want. Independent people get what they want through their own effort, and interdependent people combine their own effort with the efforts of others to achieve success." And for me, this is really the most important point. It's about how do we combine our efforts with the efforts of others to achieve success. And that's all that effective teamwork is about. It's about the win. How do we get everyone working together towards the same goal? And I really learned a lot about the power of nature, and particularly about my horses, the lessons that they taught me about business and how to lead more effectively. It was really when I got those insights from my first ever horse, Toby, because what I realized on reflection was when I was in the corporate world, Toby had been teaching me the best business lessons I needed to learn, except for the time I didn't have the manual to understand them, which is nowadays why I partner with my horses, and Toby in particular, to help business leaders become better at leading themselves and leading others, and learning the skills to create high performance teams, because the horses work in this independent way. And this is something that happens in nature all the time. Because I think this is really important for us to understand. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. Business is made up of a system of interrelated parts. But what I tend to find is that my clients and people I talk to tend to regard their businesses as a combination of separate business units. And what happens with that is then we create this kind of silo mentality. So my department, the finance department, won't share any resources with your department, the marketing department. And this is really negative to the success of businesses. So what we see is that these individual departments tend to build up walls around themselves. They create their own little chiefdoms, and they tend to be led by ego and the desire to succeed at any price. And this can really badly lead to the demise of a company's culture. It can kill communication. More importantly, it's a massive waste of skills and resources because we're not sharing everything that we've got to get the best success. What I propose is that instead of building these walls up between all these different teams and organizations within the organization, I suggest that companies really start thinking about the power of collaboration and how when we do that and it's aligned with a shared vision, we maximize our effectiveness and our contribution really positively towards the results of the business. What we see is that nature is an inherently complex system, and it's built on this interdependence I've been talking about. And it's actually the interdependence that keeps nature working so efficiently. And there's this symbiotic relationship between the animals and the environment, where everything impacts everything else. And within this ecosystem, there exists harmony and balance. Imbalances only occur when some aspect does not have enough influence. So what we see in nature that we don't really see in business is nature tends to continue to evolve and adapt in a kind of stable way. And that's very different from the boom-bust cycles that we often see in a business ecosystem. We can all remember probably the financial crisis of 2007, 8, 9, big financial crisis there. There was one at the beginning of the 90s as well. And what we tend to see in business is that there's often about a 10-year cycle where everything goes really well, then it crashes and it comes back up again and crashes again. So we've got this cyclical nature of business, but it's in this boom-bust way that's not very healthy. And what I've really observed about nature is that nature always seeks to stay in harmony. And it's only when its natural rhythm is disturbed that does some cataclysmic event need to happen to restore order. Because actually in nature, sustainability is the norm. And short-term gains never serve the longer-term gain for any element of nature, which is why when things get out of balance, harmony must immediately be restored. And in nature, animals understand that if a conflict arises, it needs to be dealt with swiftly. And conflict really can be viewed as disruption to the harmonious state. And these normal operating procedures cannot be maintained if everyone and everything is not aligned. So let me give you an example. Within a herd of wild horses, we see this happening regularly. The lead stallion of a band of mares will have his leadership challenged by a young bachelor male. And that's a disruption to the status quo. And then what happens is the lead stallion and the bachelor stallion get into a fight. It's quick and it's fierce, and at the end of the ruckus, harmony is restored, with the result of either the lead stallion retains his herd of mares or he loses them and is forced out of the herd. But this desire to maintain balance and harmony is not something I often experience in organizations. And many businesses I work with can be viewed as actively sabotaging their success because they're so focused on short-term gains that they fail to recognize when their actions are not sustainable. And the problem is that this is a real challenge that we have in a society where we reward short-term gains and immediate gratification over longer-term sustainability. And we see this in companies time and time again, this boom bust cycle that I was talking about. Actually, for many companies, they perceive this as their winning formula because the leader, the CEO, is rewarded based on their results right now rather than the impact their actions will have in the future. And this is what Simon Sinek talks about in his book, The Infinite Game, that so many CEOs come in, they're making decisions to make their financial statements look good, but they're making decisions that really have a short-term effect on the business. And they're not really thinking about the long-term consequences because typically they won't be in the business in 5 to 10 years' time to have to tackle the challenges they've caused by their decision-making made now. And I really want you to think about that because that is really a big problem. And if you just think about it, the way our financial markets are set up entirely drives short-term thinking. Many publicly listed companies have to report to the stock exchange every 3 months. So business leaders are making decisions based on the next 3 months rather than the next 3 years. And I'm pretty sure this is one of the reasons why we've run into a situation now within the world where we don't have much sustainability because everyone has been so fixated on short-term gains rather than the longer-term results that are possible. So organizations that fail to appreciate that business is this living organism, a system of interdependent and interrelated parts that need to cooperate to achieve success, when we fail to recognize that, we get all these independent units working individually of each other. And what we fail to realize is that each individual unit has its own energy and flow to how it operates, which is why we need to harness everything together. And that's why we need to recognize that everything needs to work collaboratively together. And actually, if we just think of this on a biological perspective, each team member, you and me, are comprised of a series of cells that interact. And human health is only maintained when everything is in balance, something we call homeostasis. And dis-ease is a result of some element falling out of alignment. And so it's the same thing with organizations. They thrive when everyone's aligned behind a shared purpose and vision, and when everyone has shared values and where a culture exists that supports each part of the business. And conflict arises when the business falls ill, when we see poor performance and inefficiencies and lack of productivity. Because unlike the human body, which when we experience disease, we can create these antibodies to attack the invading virus, organizational leaders, in my experience, are often less aggressive in their pursuit of removing toxic influences from the office. And this is when we see this silo mentality happening, and then the negative culture often emerges. And this can really harm an organization. Some of you might recall I used to work at Arthur Andersen, which used to be one of the top 5 accountancy firms in the world. Arthur Andersen literally imploded back in 2001-2 because we had one part of the organization that decided to go rogue. Reportedly, they were part of the auditing team for the Enron account, and they got into some bad practices, partly probably because with short-term aim to make the Enron stock look good. But the end result was that Andersen got pulled up by the SEC, which is the American accounting body, for mispractice. And as a result of that, all of our clients left because they didn't trust us. And you remember in an earlier podcast, we discussed the importance of trust in business. If your clients don't feel that they can trust you as the auditor, the accountant of their business, and they leave, then you just don't have a business. And that's exactly what happened with Andersen. All of our clients left because they couldn't be seen to be working with us really because of this level of trust and this breach of trust that the company had exhibited really through one rogue element. And it's just such a great example of how that one piece of the business brought down an entire global organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. One of the things that I really love about nature and this independence is that nature really understands how to collaborate. And I believe that nature's got a blueprint for us on how to do this. But in my experience within business, few people really understand what collaboration means. Most people think that collaboration means giving up something to accommodate someone else. Whereas actually, in my view, collaboration is about creating this win situation where all parties benefit. So one person contributes to something that's built on and leveraged by somebody else. And this is the result of the power of collaboration. It's where the outcome is more than the sum of the parts. And that's why this teamwork is so important. Teamwork is such a great example of collaboration when done well, because it's a massive example of how 1 + 1 can equal 3. And this is why I talk about teamwork as this secret superpower, because collaboration is such a competitive force. Its benefits can escalate throughout a business and throughout an organization. And in last week's podcast, as I said, we spoke a lot about great examples of teamwork and collaboration from nature, from part of the Big Five, the big African Big Five. But if you were to look at environments, you've got a controlled, a cooperative, and a collaborative environment. Controlled environments are characterized by competition for clients, resources, partners, and public attention. Whereas collaborative environments, the interactions are based on a shared purpose, mission, and goal. In the controlled environment, this is where we have the silo mentality. Whereas in collaborative environments, we get shared decision-making and resources. And in those controlled environments, there's no sharing of resources and no systemic connection between the different parties. Whereas in collaborative environments, everyone is working together for the highest good of the organization. So on a scale of trust, we could see that controlled environments are actually low trust environments and collaborative environments are high trust environments. So how do you create a collaborative workplace? Leaders need to be agile and adopt the best leadership style in the moment. They need to ensure that they engage team members and groups outside of the formal control and inspire them to work towards this common goal, despite differences in convictions, cultural values, and operating norms. And most people I talk to understand intuitively that collaborative leadership is the opposite to command and control. And let's just talk a little bit then about these differences between these two types of leadership. Because how does that show up? Command and control leadership, in terms of organizational structure, typically shows itself as a hierarchy. Whereas collaborative leadership is a lot more dispersed, cross-cultural organizational networks. And what I'm seeing more in organizations is this desire to have a kind of flatter structure where we bring and collaborate and bring the right people together on a team to do the right job, and then it disperses. And I think that this is really important because sometimes the hierarchy still needs to exist. We need to have that organizational structure. But the important thing is that we always think about our role within the organization rather than our rank, and not get hung up by the hierarchy and the fact that we can't do things because we might not have a high enough position in the organization. And this is why when I think about teams and organizations, I always say everyone's a leader, because I think we've all got the ability to step into that leadership position and demonstrate collaborative leadership at any point in time within the business. One of the things that we observe in command and control environments is that senior management has all the relevant information. Whereas in much more collaborative environments, team members at all levels and all locations and a variety of different stakeholders have the right relevant information they need in order to do the work. In the command and control structure, the people at the top of the organization have the clear authority to make final decisions. And I'd like you to contrast that with a collaborative environment where the people leading and participating in the collaborations have the clear authority and ability to make decisions. They're the people closest to the front line with what's going on to me, they're the people that have the most power and are the most empowered to make the best decisions. In a command and control environment, financial results against a plan is how we measure accountability and control. Whereas in a collaborative environment, we measure this against performance and achieving a shared goal. So where does each of these types of leadership work best? Command and control works best within a defined hierarchy, and it works poorly in complex organizations when innovation is important. So therefore, it stands to be true that in collaborative environments, this type of leadership works well when diverse groups and cross-unit and cross-company work, and when innovation and creativity are critical. And we've spoken on some of the previous podcasts about VUCA, this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. And I truly believe that in the environment that we're working in today, there's just no way that this command and control structure can work. And this is why we need this collaborative structure. We see the collaborative structure in nature. We saw, as I said last week, lots of examples of collaboration and teamwork from nature. And I just believe that if we take this approach to working together, then we are going to get much better results for our business. And the final thing I just want to talk about nature and business and how they mirror each other so well is the fact that there's a natural rhythm to nature. We all go through the seasons, right? We've got the winter season. And during winter, that's the time that kind of nature restores itself and it creates, and then it emerges into spring. And in spring, we see everything blooming and flourishing before we go into summer. And finally, we go back into autumn, where everything kind of hunkers back down again. We see all the leaves falling off the tree before we get back to winter again. And the whole cycle restores itself. This process that we see in nature is actually something that we see in business as well, if you think about it. Because every business starts emerging like in the spring and starts growing. And then as the business progresses and blooms, it moves into summer. And this is where the business is becoming a bit more mature. And then we pass into autumn, where we start to see the fruits of our labor coming out. And then finally, we move back into winter, where we see a business cycle kind of die off. And this is the point in a business where we want to see a lot of product extensions and refinding ways to revitalize the business so that it can come back into a spring season. So a business is always going through a life cycle as well. And I think it's really important to recognize that different leaders lead best at different points in the business cycle. So if you recall back to the episode 7 on about know your role in the herd, there's definitely some leaders that are better at the startup phase of a business in this spring season when we need to get everything going. Other leaders are better at leading it through other points of the cycle. And then some leaders are amazing at the kind of exit, which might happen in the winter months, or the reinvention of that business to help it relaunch back into spring. So a business has seasons as well as the natural world. And so this is what creates a natural flow of business, just like we have in the natural world as well. So business has a natural flow and nature has a natural flow. And if you think about it as well, as individuals, as people, we have a natural flow. We have a natural rhythm. Some of you might be more morning people. Some of you might be more evening people. So everything has a rhythm to it when we think about it. And I think that's really important for us to remember that what I'm seeing now for a lot of business leaders is this continual foot to the metal. I call it pedal to the metal. Businesses are just working their team members hard. And as a result, people don't have time to rest and relax like the animals do. They hibernate in the winter and they come back out again. within business, we're pushing our people and our team members really to the edge. And that is why we're experiencing so much burnout within the organization, because people haven't had the opportunity to put their natural rhythm into their days, into their working weeks. That really serves them. And this is why I talk a lot about managing the energy of the business, managing the energy of our team members, because if we don't, we just burn everybody out. So I'm really curious today about what your biggest takeaway is about what we can learn from nature to help us lead our businesses more effectively. Is it the fact that we need to focus on the rhythms of our business and how they go? Is it that we need to embrace this concept of collaboration and how everything works together? Or is it about this kind of interdependence, that what we do in one area has this ripple impact that goes somewhere else? So those are just some of my thoughts on teamwork and creating impactful teamwork today. I really hope you found them interesting. I'd love to connect with you, so please do feel free to sign up for a complimentary e-version of my book, Unbridled Business. I'm sure you find it full of useful information. It also presents in there my methodology for running a successful business called the Unbridled Business Blueprint that I'll delve into on another episode. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to connect with me on social media at Julia Felton or at Business Horsepower. And if you've got any questions or topics that you'd like us to discuss on this podcast going forward, then please do reach out. It's been such a pleasure sharing this with you again today. I am just so passionate about the lessons we can learn from nature and how we can use that to create better businesses. And I really wish that more and more people would recognize this and embrace these concepts, because I'm sure it will make business a much better place to work. So have a great day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?